Here's the part nobody tells you until it's already too late. Most millionaires weren't created by a lucky break, a viral idea, a bull market, or a dream salary. They were created by a quiet, boring, invisible ritual that compounds in the background while everyone else scrolls, reacts, and wastes the same time complaining about money. And the habit takes only 30 minutes a day. Not glamorous, not Instagram worthy, not the kind of thing people brag about online. But those 30 minutes act like a hidden lever, a small force that moves a massive financial outcome. Every person who crossed seven figures early admits it in quiet conversations, even if they never say it publicly. Every wealth manager sees it in client data, and every long-term chart of real net worth growth confirms the same uncomfortable truth. You don't need more intensity, you need more consistency. 30 minutes of intentional financial behavior per day is enough to tilt a lifetime. But to understand why, you first have to understand a darker pattern. Most people treat wealth building like an emotional drama. Bursts of motivation, long gaps of stagnation, random restarts on Monday, occasional panic after a bad month, then quitting before compounding, even wakes up. That's why the average investor underperforms the market by 7% annually. Not because they're dumb, but because they're inconsistent. The wealthy don't necessarily earn more. They don't necessarily invest smarter. They simply repeat small actions relentlessly until the math becomes irreversible. This is where the 30-minute habit comes in. It forces the brain into the one state where wealth actually grows, controlled repetition without emotional volatility. For the first year, nothing impressive happens. Your net worth crawls. Your charts look flat. Your income barely moves. Your investments feel too small to matter, and your patience is tested every single day. But somewhere between year 3 and year 7, the lines bend. Slow curves sharpen. Boring behaviors pay off. And one day, you wake up and realize your money is growing faster than your effort. You didn't change. The habit didn't change, but the scale did. And scale is what flips the script. That's why wealthy people protect those 30 minutes like territory. They don't negotiate them. They don't skip them. They don't let noise interfere because they know that time is the ignition point, the switch that activates compounding, the filter that prevents mistakes, the mental space where long-term thinking replaces reactive panic. 30 minutes a day won't make you feel rich, but it will make you become rich, slowly, quietly, mathematically, inevitably. Before we break down the habit itself, you need to understand why it works far better than motivation, grit, hustle, or even high income. And that's exactly where we go next. What surprises most people about wealth is how little of it depends on numbers and how much of it depends on rhythm. Not brilliance, not luck, not timing, rhythm. The 30-minute habit that quietly turns ordinary people into millionaires has nothing to do with predicting markets or chasing the right stock. It has everything to do with building a daily environment where wealth becomes the default outcome instead of a distant goal. This habit works because it forces your financial life into alignment, not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently. It's a small ritual, so small it's easy to underestimate, that rewires how you think, how you behave, and how you make decisions with money. Most people never build this rhythm because they think wealth requires intensity, but intensity burns out. Rhythm compounds. So what happens during these 30 minutes? First, your mind slows to the pace of long-term thinking. You pull yourself out of the noise, headlines, hype cycles, panic drops, fear narratives, and into the quiet clarity where real financial decisions are made. These minutes separate reaction from intention. They create space between emotion and action. And in that space, your financial behavior becomes dramatically more stable. Second, you reconnect with your numbers, not obsessively, not anxiously, just enough to stay oriented. You look at your savings rate, your upcoming contributions, the long-term trajectory of your net worth. You check the direction, not the daily fluctuations. This simple awareness prevents 90% of the mistakes that keep people stuck: panic selling, overbuying, chasing fads, skipping contributions, drifting off their plan. Third, you reinforce identity. People think habits shape outcomes, but habits shape identity first. Every one of these sessions tells your brain, I am the kind of person who builds wealth intentionally. This identity compounds faster than your investments. Once your self image shifts, your actions follow automatically. Wealth stops being something you chase and becomes something you maintain. Fourth, this habit exposes patterns you would otherwise miss. Overspending that creeps in quietly, a savings rate sliding by a few percentage points, new opportunities appearing on the horizon. You catch these early, not when they become problems, but when they're still small adjustments. This is why the wealthy seem lucky. They aren't lucky. They are aware. Fifth, your consistency becomes self-correcting. When you review your plan daily, you don't drift far. When you drift, you catch it quickly. When you correct it quickly, you maintain momentum. This is the rhythm that builds millionaires. Small course corrections done repeatedly, not giant efforts done occasionally. Finally, these 30 minutes anchor your emotional state. Most financial mistakes are emotional mistakes: fear, excitement, impatience, comparison, chaos. 30 minutes of structured clarity keep your emotions from hijacking your decisions. And when emotions stop controlling your behavior, compounding begins to work exactly as it was designed to. The reason this habit works is simple: it makes wealth building boring and therefore sustainable. We're taught to believe money grows from dramatic moments, but it grows from quiet ones. Short moments of consistent awareness, short moments of course correction, short moments of identity reinforcement. 30 minutes is not a task, it's an environment. And in that environment, wealth has no choice but to accumulate. Most people think habits shape your life emotionally. In reality, they reshape your financial trajectory mathematically. The 30-minute habit isn't powerful because of what you do in those minutes. It's powerful because of what those minutes unlock over months, years, and eventually decades. This is where most people misunderstand wealth building. They look for larger numbers, larger risks, larger wins, when what they really needed was a stable system applied repeatedly over an extremely long period of time. The secret behind the 30-minute millionaire habit is compounding rhythm. The idea that your financial engine accelerates not just from money, but from the consistency of decisions that support that money. You're not just investing, you're feeding a system, and systems outperform emotions every single time. Here's the part no one explains: compounding isn't purely a percentage story. It's a frequency story. Two people can invest identical amounts at identical returns, yet the one who consistently practices a 30-minute weekly ritual will build significantly more wealth. Not because the math is different, but because their behavior never interrupts the math. The consistency protects the trajectory. It eliminates drift. It eliminates impulsive mistakes. It eliminates the emotional volatility that causes most people to sabotage their own returns. During those 30 minutes, you do something deceptively small. You check your contributions, not your market results. You verify your automation, not your short-term swings. You adjust your savings rate, not your predictions about where stocks are going. Small alignment, repeated over hundreds of weeks, becomes a financial force multiplier. The wealthy understand this. They don't spend hours analyzing markets. They don't chase every headline. They maintain systems that require short, intentional check-ins and then stay out of their own way. Those 30 minutes keep the machine calibrated. Without them, the system decays, contributions drift, habits fade, budgets leak, anxiety grows, and investors begin improvising instead of executing. That's why the 30-minute habit quietly creates millionaires, because it stops the decay before it starts. Here's the deeper mathematical effect. Consistent microadjustments create smoother compounding curves. Smoother curves have fewer drops, fewer interruptions, fewer resets. Fewer resets mean exponential acceleration arrives sooner. Most people underestimate how much wealth they lose from behavioral resets. The periods where they stop contributing, panic, change strategies, or delay investing because they need to think. Every reset flattens the curve. Every reset steals years of growth. The 30-minute habit eliminates those resets entirely. And that stability is where the numbers begin separating ordinary investors from long-term wealth builders. After a few years of weekly 30-minute calibration, something changes. Your savings rate increases slightly. Your contributions become automated. Your spending becomes intentional. Your emotional decisions disappear. Your net worth begins moving, not because of some giant action, but because of hundreds of tiny ones that never broke rhythm. The richest people in the world don't win with brilliance. They win with stability. The 30-minute habit is simply the tool that preserves that stability long enough for compounding to reveal its real power. The power that only shows up after years of uninterrupted forward motion. By the time you've practiced the 30-minute habit long enough, something deeper and far more permanent begins to happen. You stop doing it as a task and start doing it as part of who you are. This is the turning point wealthy people rarely talk about because it sounds too simple, too ordinary, too unremarkable to matter. But it matters more than anything else. Your identity shifts from someone trying to build wealth to someone who expects wealth to grow because your daily behavior makes it unavoidable. The first sign of this shift is subtle. You no longer sit down for your 30 minutes because of motivation, guilt, fear, or excitement. You do it because that's what you do. It feels wrong not to check in with your plan. It feels strange not to invest. It feels unnatural not to review your spending or organize your priorities. The habit becomes a psychological anchor, a daily reset that keeps you aligned with the future you're building. And once identity takes over, discipline stops costing energy. You stop debating. You stop negotiating. You stop relying on willpower. The habit becomes automatic. And automatic is where compounding accelerates. This is the moment when you start noticing a new kind of clarity. Decisions that once exhausted you now take seconds. You no longer wonder what to do with extra income. You already know. You no longer fear investing on red days. You've seen enough cycles to know the story. You no longer chase trends. You've replaced excitement with structure. That structure is what wealthy people rely on. Not hype, not luck, structure. Something else changes too. Your tolerance for short-term noise collapses. A market dip doesn't shake you. It gives you a better entry point. A slow month doesn't discourage you. It's one frame in a 1,000-frame movie. A setback doesn't derail you. Your next 30-minute session absorbs it and redirects you. This habit silently strengthens your ability to endure volatility without emotion. And that, more than any strategy, stock pick, or timing decision, is what separates long-term wealth builders from the 90% who quit too early. When this identity shift becomes permanent, you start seeing your future differently. You don't think in terms of, I hope this works. You think in terms of course it will work. Look at what I do every day. That's the mindset wealthy people carry long before they ever become wealthy. The habit plants the identity. The identity sustains the habit. The combination sustains compounding. And that's when you discover the quiet truth the rich understand. Consistency doesn't just build money. It builds the person capable of holding that money. In the next part, we'll break down what happens when the 30-minute habit compounds for years and why the results don't just add up. They transform everything. The strangest part about this 30-minute habit isn't how easy it is to do. It's how quietly it transforms your entire financial future long before you realize what's happening. There's no celebration, no dramatic turning point, no sudden jump in your net worth. What you feel instead is a gradual shift, a quiet, steady rise in clarity, confidence, and control. And then, one day, the truth hits you. This small daily routine has been building something enormous behind the scenes. This is the moment almost every long-term investor describes, but almost no one believes before they experience it themselves. The habit feels ordinary at first. Review your spending, check your accounts, automate the next transfer, run one small calculation, make one small improvement, half an hour a day. Nothing extreme, nothing glamorous, nothing social media worthy. But every session adds another layer to a system that becomes too strong to fall apart. You begin to notice the changes in subtle ways. Your decisions feel cleaner, your impulses weaken, your goals sharpen, your spending aligns with your values instead of your mood, and your money stops leaking through 1,000 tiny cracks. People think millionaire habits are built from grand ideas and big moves. They aren't. They come from eliminating the slow, invisible financial bleeding most people never notice. But the real transformation isn't in the numbers, it's in your identity. After months of practicing this 30-minute routine, you stop seeing yourself as someone who tries to be good with money. You start seeing yourself as someone who simply is. The discipline becomes automatic. Your thinking shifts from emergency mode to long-term structure, and the decisions that once felt difficult now feel effortless. This is what wealthy people understand intuitively. Consistency isn't something you fight for every day. It's something you build until it becomes easier to do the right thing than the wrong one. And once that shift occurs, your financial life moves into a different trajectory altogether. You start noticing opportunities you never saw before. You start preparing instead of reacting. You start optimizing instead of guessing. You start building instead of hoping. Your portfolio begins compounding faster, not just because of the market, but because your mistakes have disappeared. Your habits protect you. Your decisions compound. Your routines strengthen the system every single day. Then the second quiet shift happens. You start spending less time worrying about money and more time actually living. This is the hidden advantage wealthy people enjoy. Not luxury, not status, not comfort, but mental space. They make better decisions because their minds aren't overcrowded with financial stress. They take smarter risks because their foundation is stable. They move through life with clarity because they know exactly where they're going and why. And that is ultimately what this 30-minute habit creates. Not just wealth, not just a bigger portfolio, not just financial safety. It builds a life where your money no longer controls you. Your systems do. The people who ignore this habit spend their lives reacting. The people who adopt it quietly become millionaires, not because they are lucky, not because they earn more, but because they built something far more powerful than motivation, a daily routine that compounds just as relentlessly as their investments. And once it's built, it never stops working.